2021 Spring Forum. And again, I'm Vice Mayor Tammy Kim from the city of Irvine, and I'll be your moderator this evening. And for those of you joining us for the first time, we are the Korean American Public Action Committee, otherwise known as KAPAC. KAPAC's been leading the way on various community service efforts throughout this pandemic, such as raising funds for frontline workers and working with UNICEF on humanitarian efforts in North Korea. KAPAC is very well known for hosting a series of education and discussion panels, such as this evening's event, where we bring Korean and leaders and also leaders here in the United States to discuss very complex topics as it relates to US and Korean relations, and including inter-Korean relations. And tonight's discussion is Peace on the Korean Peninsula, declaring an end to the Korean War, reconciliation, and a start of diplomatic dialogue. So I'm personally excited to moderate this evening's event with our keynote speaker, Brad Sherman. And if we would, can I just ask you, if you haven't already, please take a moment to mute yourselves so that way we don't get a lot of feedback. So appreciate that very much. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to silently salute our national flags. Thank you. So please allow me to introduce 최광철 대표님, Casey Choi, President of KAPAC, who will provide our opening remarks.
Hi, everyone. Having a strong friendship with Honorable Congressman Brad Sherman has been a great honor and pleasure for me, KAPAC, and all Korean American community. With his strong leadership and tireless dedication in the Capitol Hill, we saw some meaningful progresses on the peace issues of Korean Peninsula, like divided family reunion, official end of Korean War, congressional briefing session on Kaesong Industrial Complex, and much more than that. I'm sure he will make a historic cornerstone for the permanent peace on Korean Peninsula anytime soon. Great to see all of the members of KAPAC, leaders of Korean American community, young generation of AAYC, and many other distinguished guests from US and overseas through Zoom link and YouTube Live today. God bless you all. I also want to say special thanks to Mr. Song Young-gil, Chairman of Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee of National Assembly, and Consul General of ROK, Dr. Park Kyung-jae 총영사님, for taking precious time with us. I can feel all of your passion and energy to the peace on Korean Peninsula, and I strongly believe that with everyone working together and with the strong support from Congressman Sherman, we are going to eventually get through all difficulties we are facing at this trying time. Please enjoy this moment with Congressman Sherman, and I hope to see you all face-to-face in-person event anytime soon. Thank you so much. We always go together. Thank you.
Thank you, 대표님, for your very warm, welcoming remarks. Next, I'd like to introduce our chairman of KAPAC, Chris Kim, for additional set of opening welcome remarks.
In the midst of Derek Chauvin's trial for George Floyd's death, we see so many social crises in our country, America. There are crying demand for social justice, for stop racial hate crimes against Asian Americans. I see and I hear voices demanding peace, justice, and equality from our city, street, schools, markets, and even from our own Capitol Hill. We gather together today to hear from our honorary Congressman Brad Sherman to promote peace process in Korean Peninsula. We all want to see declaration to the end of the Korean War and moving forward to peace free. It's not easy, and there are many barriers. That's why we are here today. I hope we have a meaningful from today. We all listen carefully what the key speaker note will say and ask some questions. I welcome everyone who joined from all across the United States, South Korea, Europe, and Canada. I wish the best, our friend, Honorable Congressman Sherman, and look forward new diplomatic solution between USA and both South and North Korea. Have a good time today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kim. So next, we would like to welcome the Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the National Assembly of the Republic of Korea, Song Young-gil. I think he's
unmute, please. 송 의원님, 음소거 하셔야 돼요. Unmute, please.
예, 안녕하세요, 송 의원님.
Oh, okay.
들립니까? 예.
네.
네.
제가 뭐 해야 되는가요? 축사해야 되는가요?
네.
아, 그래요. 먼저 다른 분들 다 하셨는가요?
Yes.
예. 네, 반갑습니다. 저는 국회 외교통일위원회 위원장 송영길입니다. It is a pleasure to be here again for the 2021 KAPAC Spring Forum's online session. As always, I would like to express my sincere thanks to the President of KAPAC, Cassie, for allowing me to give a congratulatory remarks. I would also like to thank Representative Brad Sherman for providing us with the U.S. perspective toward the Korean Peninsula. It is good to see you again, Representative Sherman. I'm grateful to everyone else here today for turning their attention to the issue of the Korean Peninsula. Firstly, I want to underline that we must free the Korean Peninsula from the threat of nuclear weapons. Also, we must eliminate the threat posed by North Korean nuclear and missiles development once and for all. However, we should never forget that we must achieve this only through the peaceful and diplomatic means, backed by the solid policy and the coordination between the ROK and the US alliance. For now, permanent peace has yet to be established on the Korean Peninsula. The armistice signed in July 1953, after 3 years of devastation, has left the two Koreas technically still at war. The 68 years since then have seen a few periods of dialogue and reconciliation between the two sides. But it had been characterized mainly by military tension and mutual hostility. North Korea's nuclear and missile development greatly added to the tension and posed a grave security challenge for the whole world. However, if we want to resolve this 68 years old issue, we need to think outside of the box. Although it made the region unstable and North Korea's thirst for the security via nuclear and missile development shows that they do not want to become a subordinate country to China and North Russia. They are seeking their own sovereignty and independent countries. This gives the ROK-US alliance a chance to bring North Korea as a sovereign nation to the world. We already witnessed a similar development in the 1970s, from the Vietnam War to a rapprochement between the United States and Vietnam. Much like Vietnam's history, once a hermit kingdom can be another Vietnam, shaking China's rise and keeping the balance of power in the region. For lasting peace, we must work to denuclearize North Korea and replace the armistice with a peace treaty that will define the parameters of the peaceful coexistence between the South and North Korea. With a whole new diplomatic framework, so we can achieve the South and North peaceful coexistence, which will significantly help the ROK-US alliance to achieve our alliance with greater ambition. I will look forward to work closely with Representative Sherman and the KAPAC to achieve the permanent peace regime on the Korean Peninsula. Firstly, I'm planning to visit Washington, D.C. one more time, but owing to COVID-19, the pandemic, and also, as you know, we the Democratic Party of the convention is supposed to hold next month, and I am prepared running for president of the Democratic Party, and I have no approach to meet Washington, D.C. And my plan, after I elect the president of the Democratic Party, at the time I planned the official visit to Washington, D.C. At the time, I hope the chance to meet all the KAPAC members. I always support the KAPAC activity. Thank you, everyone. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Hong. Next, I'd like to introduce the Consul General of the Republic of Korea here in Los Angeles, 박경재. 말씀하세요.
예, 안녕하십니까. 박경재입니다. It is my great honor to make congratulatory remarks for the KAPAC's 2021 Spring Forum. I'd like to thank President Che and all the members of the KAPAC for hosting this timely and meaningful forum. And I'd like to express my utmost gratitude to the Honorable Congressman Sherman for sharing his valuable time with us. I'd like also to express my sincere gratitude to the Honorable Chairman of the Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee of the Korean National Assembly for coming to this forum. Since its foundation in 2017, the Korean American Public Action Committee is the most active and productive Korean American organization in promoting peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. Its activities are based on diaspora public diplomacy. Korean Americans across the U.S. engage in people-to-people diplomatic activities to promote universal values such as peace, justice, and democracy. KAPAC also engaged in actions supporting the House of Representatives resolutions for declaration of the end of Korean War, for the reunion of separated families by the Korean War between North Korea and U.S. I also know that Congressman Sherman has played an indispensable role for those resolutions. I sincerely appreciate the KAPAC and the Congressman Sherman for being the strong champions of peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. As we all know well, the Biden administration is currently finalizing its policy toward North Korea. Last week, the national security advisors of the US, Japan, and Korea had a series of dialogue to discuss North Korea and other issues, and reaffirmed their commitment to address them through concerted cooperation. The path to resolve those issues, including the denuclearization of North Korea, will be long and challenging, but with your continuing support for peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula, I believe that we will eventually achieve the goal. I look for the meaningful and productive discussion tonight. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Thank you so much, Consul General. It is always such a pleasure to hear from you. I'd like to actually welcome to the stage KAPAC's Executive Vice President, Lee Sung-woo, who will introduce our keynote speaker. But before we do, I'd like to share with you all video highlights of our keynote speaker, Congressman Brad Sherman.
예, 안녕하세요. KAPAC 소속 부회장 이성우입니다. 제 말씀 들리십니까?
잘 들립니다.
네, 반갑습니다.
그리고 골든 타임이 얼마나 중요해요.
잠시
If we can ask everyone to put themselves on mute, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm K. Freeman Sung-Woon Lee, who is Executive Vice President of KAPAC. It is my great honor to introduce to the audience Congressman Brad Sherman tonight. Congressman Sherman was born and raised in Southern California and represents California San Fernando Valley. He is currently serving his 13th term in Congress and has served in the House of Representatives since 1997. Congressman received a bachelor's degree in political science from UCLA, where he graduated summa cum laude. Later, he received his law degree from Harvard, where he graduated magna cum laude. He then worked as a CPA, attorney, and certified tax law specialist. He also served on the California State Board of Equalization from 1991 to 1996. He was the chairman of the board from 1991 and 1995. Congressman Sherman has developed a reputation as a strong advocate for working families. He has also worked for robust environmental standards, federal aid to education, healthcare reform, and the protection of Social Security and Medicare. The Congressman has also supported many policies to expand U.S. exports, prevent the proliferation of nuclear weapons, and promote a just and effective U.S. foreign policy. Congressman Sherman currently serves on the three major House committees. He is a senior member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, senior member of House Election Service Committee, and a member of House Science, Space and Technology Committee. In 2019, Congressman was elected to serve as chair of the House Financial Services Subcommittee on Investor Protection, Entrepreneurship, and Capital Markets. He previously served as chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Asia Subcommittee. Here is our main speaker tonight, Congressman Brad Sherman. Audiences, please give him a big applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Freeman. Thank you, KAPAC, for inviting me. I'm Congressman Brad Sherman from America's best named city, Sherman Oaks, and it is great to be back with KAPAC. I was going to review some of the things that I've done with your organization, and then I saw that slideshow, and it was all there. But I was honored to be your speaker at the first annual gala in Koreatown. Honored to work with you and parliamentarians from Seoul on an explanation for my colleagues on the Kaesong Economic Zone. And it was great to join you, Friedman, and Casey Choi for lunch just last Saturday. But thank you especially for joining me just before that at the inoculation site, where you donated 1,000 large bottles of hand sanitizer from the Republic of Korea to help here in the San Fernando Valley. I'll give a little bit of background about myself, and then I'll launch into the issues that bring us together. It's hard over Zoom to give a great oration, so I'll do what I can as a little square on your phone or computer, and I look forward one day soon to meeting with you all in person. I began my career as a CPA long ago. I had hair at the time, and I got together with some of my friends and said, Brad, we know you well. You should find an occupation held in lower public esteem. So I went to law school, as did Freeman. And 3 years of Harvard Law School, 10 years of practice. I got together with the same friends, and they said, Sherman, here in America, we detest attorneys, except for Freeman. In general, we detest attorneys. But it's not low enough for you, Sherman. Not even politics is low enough for you. But California has an elected revenue commission called the Board of Equalization. It's been changed since then, but was a powerful agency back a couple decades ago. And they said, we'll help you. And with their help, I was elected to the Board of Equalization, where I was simultaneously a politician and a tax collector. My friends were convinced I'd reached the appropriate level. 6 years later, my member of Congress announced his retirement from what we in politics call a swing seat. Could go Democratic, could go Republican. As I'll get to later, every 10 years, they redraw the lines. And the situation for a member of Congress can change radically. For the last 10 years, I've had a very Democratic district, but back in the 90s, this was a district that was expected to elect a Republican. Democrats were in a tizzy. How are we going to hold on to the seat without our popular incumbent? Being Democrats, they decided to unite behind a tax collector, which was the key to our success, since all over the valley I could put up signs saying, send Brad to Washington or he may come visit you. And I didn't actually do that, but I went from a tax official to member of Congress back in 1996. I have served on the Foreign Affairs Committee ever since then, making me, after 24 years, the most senior member of the committee. I represent most everyone you know who lives in the 818 area code, the South Valley and the West San Fernando Valley. And I look forward to doing it for a long, long time. I've been, as Freeman noted, chair of the Asia Subcommittee, and I've fought for a strong relationship between the United States and the Republic of Korea. There are, as you know, roughly 2 million Korean Americans. I'm proud to say that the plurality has had the brilliance to decide to live in Los Angeles, and a very large number have shown the additional brilliance to live here in the San Fernando Valley. I celebrate your community's achievements and look forward next year to the opening of the new Korean American National Museum. That museum will show Americans of all ethnicities that Korean Americans have much to be proud of. Roughly twice as many Korean Americans as other Americans have college degrees, over twice have as likely to have graduate degrees. And of course, now serving in Congress with me is Andy Kim and Marilyn Strickland and Young Kim and Michelle Steele. This is, I'm sure, the first time that we have had two of each party Korean Americans in the United States Congress. And of course, with all of the accomplishments of the Korean American community, it is outrageous that you and all Asian Americans are dealing with this wave of hate crimes. It is outrageous, and I'll go through, hopefully there'll be a question on this. I'll get more in detail. But I, for one, refer to this as the COVID-19 virus, and I have much criticism of the government of China, but I'm always careful to say that I don't disagree with the Chinese people, let alone, of course, the Korean people. And you've learned how ignorant, bigoted people are. Not only are they stupid enough to be bigoted, then they're stupid enough to apply their bigotry to people that are different from the people that they're trying to target with their bigotry. And so I criticize the government in Beijing. I criticize the Chinese Communist Party. But when you have a president of the United States referring to a disease as the Kung Fu virus, you realize that forms a foundation for ignorant bigotry. Turning to foreign affairs, we all, from a practical standpoint, know that the Korean War ended in 1953, but we need a diplomatic move to conclude a formal peace treaty as an essential step to bringing peace to the Korean Peninsula. I have therefore supported an amendment that states that diplomacy is essential to address the nuclear program, that we need to avoid military confrontation, and that we need to pursue sustained and credible diplomatic process to achieve a settlement of the nuclear program and to end the 71-year long, at least legally lasting 71 years, Korean War. Last Congress, I also co-sponsored with Ro Khanna of Northern California a resolution calling for a formal end to the Korean War. And I'll support this resolution as a separate resolution when it's reintroduced. But I'm also working on my own bill to deal with a number of different issues. And one provision of my bill will be to work toward a formal peace treaty concluding that this war is over, and a statement by Congress that right up front that this war is over. Another part of my bill will deal with the issues of family reunification. The fact that in order to get the family visits that I'd like to see, we have to try to improve the relationship in general, and take steps that are particular to the United States. One of the things that has prevented us from arranging these family visits is that we don't have any diplomatic presence in Pyongyang, and Pyongyang has no diplomatic presence in Washington, D.C. They do, of course, have their embassy to the United Nations, but that's a physically long way from Washington, where American foreign policy is made. There have been 21 family reunions between North Koreans and South Koreans over the last 20 years. But the Korean American community has not had a single one of those visits. I'm working to change that. I've written letters to then President Trump, to President Moon, to make this a priority in discussions with Kim Jong-un. I've reached out on many occasions trying to set up a meeting. We were close once to getting one with the North Korean UN mission about setting up these family visits. And along with Casey and others, I participated in an event on these family reunification visits just a year or so ago, sponsored by the other KAPAC, the Korean Asian Pacific American Caucus, of which I am a proud member. Yeah. In addition, I've joined my colleagues in introducing two pieces of legislation regarding the importance of these family reunification visits. One, the Divided Families Reunification Act, and the other, the Encouraging Reunions of Divided Korean American Families resolution. And I look forward not only to passing these through the House, but next year getting them passed this year, really getting them passed through the Senate. And of course, that a liaison office is an important step to dealing with this issue and other issues. Another part of it, because the thinking is so many times these visits don't occur because North Korea won't allow them to occur. But it's got to be clear that the United States will allow these reunification visits. We have a special passport that's used by U.S. citizens when they visit North Korea. These are rare. They can be issued for, quote, humanitarian reasons. We need by statute to clarify that humanitarian reasons includes these family unification visits and also includes, and I know how important this is to at least one person who is watching, either a funeral or a burial of a deceased relative in their hometown or other area north of the 38th parallel. The bill I'm working on, of course, will, as I've said, include a declaration for a peace, calling for the conclusion of a binding peace agreement, and will include language to establish these liaison offices. I've made the peace on the Korean Peninsula an important goal of mine throughout my term in Congress, but particularly while I chaired the Asia Subcommittee. You may remember that we had 2 hearings on the subject. One included Bill Richardson, the former governor of New Mexico, who has decades of experience negotiating with North Korea. We had David Stilwell, the Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia, who testified, also addressing family reunifications and the need to take up negotiations with North Korea, not just for family reunion visits from north and south of the parallel, but also involving Korean Americans. In addition, several of you were with us when we had the conference on Capitol Hill about the Kaesong Industrial Complex, and I believe that complex can be reopened as part of a larger agreement with North Korea. And of course, we would want to make sure that if goods are made there and imported to the United States, that the workers there are treated fairly and safely. Also, back in 2019, I hosted my colleagues for a meeting with Moon Chun-in and Moon Jae-in's special advisor for unification diplomacy and national security affairs. Another issue I'm working on is the issue of making sure that any child that's legally adopted by an American citizen and raised in the United States acquires U.S. citizenship. We have this in the law, but the law has a date in it that excludes roughly 35,000 people who have lived their entire lives here in the United States. There are thousands of individuals born in countries like South Korea that have been adopted by American parents that did not receive their citizenship. That's why I've so strongly supported the Adoptee Citizenship Act. And this would, as I say, correct that problem for 35,000 Americans. Many are of Korean heritage. In dealing with North Korea, I am somewhat more dovish than my colleagues as to the end result that I think is realistic. Not necessarily, though unwilling to do what's necessary to achieve a reasonable result. Everyone in Washington has been for at least 30 years chanting the slogan CIVID, complete, verifiable, irreversible disarmament. Even the term disarmament goes too far. North Korea is going to maintain a strong army. But I would like to see, I'd settle for incomplete, verifiable, irreversible denuclearization. And our policy toward North Korea up until now has to do nothing except sanction and demand CIVID. CIVID would leave North Korea with no nuclear deterrent at all. And they will think back to the days I was in Washington when the North Korean government was seeking a non-aggression pact, simply an agreement that neither side would start a war. And at the time, the George W. Bush administration, which at that time, for these purposes, was really the Dick Cheney administration, the vice president was very powerful on these issues, simply refused because they dreamed of aggression. And so given the history, I think that North Korea may insist upon maintaining some nuclear weapons, as long as we demand civid, we get nothing except continued sanctions. What we ought to be looking for is to settle for less, settle for North Korea retaining not the ability to create new nuclear weapons, but a certain highly monitored stockpile, very limited in number. This is important not only for peace on the Korean Peninsula, but peace worldwide. Right now, North Korea has or will soon have more nuclear weapons than any of their generals would think is necessary for the North Koreans. That being the case, they have extra nuclear weapons. And the one thing they need is hard currency, in large part because of our sanctions. Well, when you have a country that has a surplus of something and an incredible need for money, there is the tendency to look about selling what you have a surplus of. Now, everybody knows how dangerous it is to sell nuclear weapons. No country's ever done it. And I don't think North Korea would do it unless they were desperate. But the whole purpose of our sanctions is to make them desperate. So I don't want to see a circumstance where North Korea has more nuclear weapons than they want and is desperate for money, because there are terrorist organizations and rogue nations that could come into play. So it's not only peace in the Korean Peninsula, it's peace for the whole world, that we get a freeze on North Korea's fissile material production and move toward a Korean Peninsula. And I'd love to have it. And I would never give up on the eventual goal of having a completely denuclearized Korean Peninsula. But I can't, if we say we're going to continue sanctions at the highest level until we get civid, that means we're going to continue sanctions forever, and we're never going to get anything in terms of the reduction of the nuclear program. That sounds like a bold conclusion, except the last 20 years proves that what I just said is true. We have demanded civid, we have imposed tough sanctions, we have gotten nothing. And it is, of course, important that any deal with North Korea help South Korea, not come at the expense of South Korea. We know there are those in Pyongyang who dream that America will abandon South Korea and North Korea will take over the peninsula. That is never going to happen, but we have to demonstrate to Pyongyang that it will never happen. I was there just a few years ago at the Blue House, visiting the then president at the DNZ, and we maintain 28,000 troops that are not only an effective fighting force themselves, but demonstrate our commitment to the protection of South Korea. As you know, Trump has tried to pressure South Korea by on how much money. I think that was somewhat short-sighted. Obviously, America wants its allies to spend more on their own defense, but that is, to expect a 6-7-fold increase in 1 year is unrealistic and is not useful. It's just a way of making a political speech at a rally. Okay. So I look forward to working with the Biden administration as they develop a diplomatic strategy to North Korea. In a recent visit to Asia, Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin consulted with their South Korean and Japanese counterparts to address the North Korean challenge. And later, of course, there was the meeting with Chinese officials in Anchorage. I'll note that Biden has stated publicly that he would not meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un without preconditions. I hope very much that those preconditions are reasonable. Biden has stated that he would pressure China to convince North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons and would attempt to create a better relationship between South Korea and Japan. Those are all reasonable steps as long as one has a reasonable expectation. You can pound the table and say that North Korea should give up its every single one of its nuclear weapons. And I hope someday that's true, but I can't wait for that to happen before we get any progress. We've got to focus on human rights in North Korea. That's why I joined my colleagues in introducing the North Korean Human Rights Resolution, the North Korean Human Rights Reauthorization, the North Korean Human Rights Reauthorization of a prior year, and the North Korean Child Welfare Act. But we have to remember the number one thing we can do for the people of North Korea is to reach a reasonable deal, an available deal on the nuclear program, and then end the sanctions. If we do that, I think that North Korea will certainly have the ability to feed itself and provide medicine for its citizens. One then hopes that Pyongyang chooses to do just that. I've talked about the U.S. relationship with the Republic of Korea. I meet regularly with Republic of Korea officials, whether it's the president when I'm able to be in Seoul, or the foreign minister or the ambassador, both of whom have been in my office recently in Washington. South Korea, of course, had a chance to tell its story to the world when it hosted the Winter Olympics. And I've, of course, joined the resolution commending South Korea on that. We have a vibrant trade relationship with the Republic of Korea, and it is closer to being balanced than our trade relationship with many other countries. And I look forward to that relationship developing further. Obviously, the last administration was undiplomatic in its dealings with North Korea. It shifted wildly from calling Kim Jong-un Little Rocket Man to writing what appeared to be love letters. And what we need is a stable and reasonable approach in our diplomatic position. But one thing where Trump got us a little concerned, maybe very concerned, is when he was talking about just striking out at North Korea on his own. That's why I joined my colleagues in introducing the No Unconstitutional Strike Against North Korea Act, so as to prohibit a president from attacking North Korea unless we're attacked, or unless there was further congressional approval, which I assure you would not occur. We then need to try to write this provision in to the defense appropriations bill. So we not only prohibit it, we also prohibit because I could see a president vetoing, if we got it to its desk, any bill that prohibits him from doing anything in foreign affairs. But what we can do is put it in the appropriations bill, which he has to sign, stating that no money that we've appropriated can be used for an attack on North Korea in the absence of it being a response to an attack on us or on South Korea. Obviously, I criticized President Trump on unilaterally suspending joint military drills and other unilateral actions designed pretty much as just a slap against the government in Seoul. As you can see, my staff, I know this speech is going long. My staff wrote me an even longer speech, so I'm sheltering you from some of the paragraphs. And as you know, the Republic of Korea is contributing $1 billion toward the cost of maintaining our troops, and of course is contributing very substantially to its own defense. It's not realistic to think that they're going to increase by a factor of 5. I look forward to Japan and the Republic of Korea working harmoniously because they're both allies of the United States. And if they could work together, it makes America's contribution to peace in Northeast Asia stronger. But I'm realistic about the events of the 20th century, how the Korean people suffered. And I'm aware that Tokyo has been unwilling to apologize or acknowledge much as what happened in the last century. And I know that we have an excellent, not only do we have a relationship with Germany, Germany has excellent relations with its neighbors, in part because Germany has acknowledged, has apologized for so many things that happened in the 20th century. Okay. And going back to the costs, of course, in March, Biden administration reached an agreement with Korea that's going to last till 2025 about the amount of Korean contributions to the cost of maintaining American troops on the peninsula. And we've reached a parallel agreement with Japan. That's fast work for an administration that's still in its first 100 days. And I, of course, have co-sponsored and introduced resolutions regarding the importance, as I've said, of getting Japan, South Korea, and the United States to work effectively together. But no country should be punished for speaking the truth. And the partial trade embargo that the Japanese government tried to impose is simply wrong. I want to thank Casey Choi and everyone at KAPAC. Before we go to questions, just a couple of things. First, about here and in the San Fernando Valley, and just you see the situation from my standpoint. Members of Congress run for re-election every 2 years, but really, I can only be beaten once every 10 years. Why? Because every 10 years we have a census. The year after the census, they draw new district lines, and then the year after that, I run in the new district lines. That's called the redistricting process. California will probably lose a seat, but more importantly, all these districts are going to change. And while I'd like to think that I'm famous throughout California and the country, I have a personal relationship with about 750,000 people here in the San Fernando Valley. And so I hope to work with KAPAC to convince the people who are drawing the lines that the San Fernando Valley is a separate area. Any of you who have tried to drive on the 405 know that. You look on a map and Sherman Oaks looks like it's right next to Westwood, but there are mountains in between, and there's a pass. And especially, and I know some of you live in the San Fernando Valley, will back me up on this. If you live on the west side, and in the morning you want to drive to the valley, maybe it's 30 minutes. But if in the morning you live in the valley and you want to drive to the west side, it's an hour and 15 minutes. So I look forward to working with you to educate the those who are drawing the lines. It's a nonpartisan commission on the fact that the valley is so separated by mountains, by gridlock from areas that on a map look like they're immediately adjacent. So in summary, we need to end the Korean War. We need to prohibit aggression by the United States. We need to reach an agreement that prohibits aggression by both sides. The most important thing is that we reach a deal on the nuclear program, that we have realistic objectives in negotiating that deal, but that we achieve it. And at that point, we can get rid of sanctions, move toward trade, and and I think it will do a lot for family visits and so many other things we'd like to see. And obviously an improvement in the lives of the North Korean people. So with that, I'll tell my staff that I delivered every word that they suggested, and I ought to listen to questions for a minute or two. I know you've got a lot of other things to do today, and oh my God, it's almost 6 o'clock. But why don't I take a question or two, and then you can go on with other things.
Yeah, thank you so much, Congressman Sherman. Thanks for your words and for always being here and being supportive of, peace on the Korean Peninsula, because this is what we want desperately, as you know very well. So I'd like to start it off with Pastor Jae-hung Kim from Los Angeles, who has a question. 목사님, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes, it's good to hear, about your long-term, careers and backgrounds. Actually, another one, I'm living, in San Fernando Valley. It's good to know too about that. Okay.
What town do you live in?
North Hills.
Yes,
good to hear.
I'm here. I always say I'm from Sherman Oaks because it sounds so good, but I actually for several years have been here in Porter Ranch, which is not too far from North Hills. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that's why this question is good to hear from you. How could we effectively deliver our fellow Americans the message that declaring the end of the war between South and North Korea is a strong point to establish peace on the Korean Peninsula? And what else could we do to make this happen? And also to make the declaration of the ending of the war successfully worked, I think we need a contact office in USA and also North Korea for better communication. How would you advise or recommend in details Biden administrations to make this happen?
Well, first you need a coalition of Korean American groups. KAPAC is very effective, but there are other groups as well. Obviously, the more you put together, the more you've got. Second, in a few months, this sounds crazy after the last 18 months, but come to Washington, D.C. Arrange meetings with members of Congress and their foreign policy staff if you don't see the actual member. And when you go there, have a definite thing you want them to do. Visualize, like in one of those science fiction movies, that you could take control of their hand for just a few minutes. What would you do? Because I'll let you in on a secret. I'm not supposed to tell you this. Politicians do lots of meetings. And we always want whoever we meet with to like us. It's both good for business and also we're politicians. We like people to like us. That's why we chose the profession. And so many will try to get you to like them without making a commitment to do anything in particular. When you go to politician school, they say, never put it in writing if you can just say it orally. Never say it orally if you can just nod. And never even nod if you can get by with a smile. So don't do a meeting where somebody smiles and you think they're going to be with you. When you go into that meeting, you want to have something specific, and it should probably be, I'm going to have a bill, lobby for my bill, or you may want to lobby for something more narrowly tailored. But it's got to be a resolution of the House that says this war is over, that we should that we should do everything possible to avoid aggression. My bill will have some other things in it, such as establish a liaison office, work for family reunification, and so we'll see exactly whether it's a letter or a bill. You want a commitment for them to do it. Their answers, because they're never going to say no. They're politicians. They're either going to say, I'll think about it, or they're going to say yes. If they say yes, get them. If they say they think about it, say, okay, who on your staff can we call 1 week from today to find out if you're going to do it? Because if you get a smile and a promise to think about it and you go home, then all you got out of the meeting was frequent flyer miles. You want to get the commitment. So I look forward to working with KAPAC toward the particular vehicle. But this war ended before I was born, and I'm very old.
Thank you so much. And, as vice mayor for the city of Irvine, an elected politician, I learned so much from you just right now. So thank you.
Yeah, you learn a lot today.
the Brad Sherman School of Candidacy. So thank
don't
you so
use
much.
that. Don't use that on feedback.
So we know.
I should ask Pastor Kim. Pastor Kim, are you affiliated with a particular church here in the Valley?
No, my church in LA, I'm co-pastor. I'm working as a missionary works for North Korea. Yes.
Thank you. Always try to make connections here in the San Fernando Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Moksanim, for your question. So we now have a question from AYC high school student from New Jersey, Daniel Park. Daniel, can you unmute yourself and ask the congressman a question?
Hi, I am Daniel Park, a member of the AYC, or Asian American Youth Council, and my question is this. On March 30th, 2021, a 65-year-old Asian woman was assaulted on her way to church in New York City. This is one of many crimes that have been occurring during this year. I would like to know how you see these hate crimes as, and how are you going to handle these crimes? I also recently saw that there are more cops dispatched, but these crimes are still prevalent. What would be better initiative to protect our elderly?
And these crimes can fit into different categories. There are crimes where somebody is actually trying to get some money, and that is the overall crime problem. And Asian Americans can be a victim of those crimes. There are the crimes of hatred because the Asian American is there in a poor community and is better off than someone else. And I've seen those crimes take place over the years. Then there is the ongoing hate crimes against the Asian community. And then there's the additional hate crimes that we've seen since the Trump administration and the COVID crisis. It is that last group that is the focus of our attention. because it's responsible for what has been an uptick in what is already a significant problem. There are a number of things to do. The first is don't be a source of the problem. Don't go on television as President of the United States and say things that seem to be attacking Chinese Americans or Asian Americans for this terrible virus. You need a national leader and members of Congress to say that we are all one America and that we all came from somewhere and we're all here together building a country. So you got to set the national tone. And then there are particular bills designed to focus on hate crimes against Asian Americans, which I have co-sponsored. Grace Ming has a bill, the COVID-19 Hate Crimes Act. Kuth Ramurthy has the Hate Crimes Commission Act. Then, of course, Grace Ming also has her Condemning All Forms of Anti-Asian Sentiment Related to COVID-19 Act. And finally, I know that I'm working closely with Judy Chu on a lot of this. She has a bill about better keeping statistics and better deploying the Justice Department to deal with these hate crimes. But they part of it is the response that government makes, but also part of it, and I think Biden is such an improvement over Donald Trump in this, is setting a national tone. And for God's sakes, no one in national leadership should be saying things that even in the ears of the ignorant and the bigoted can be the cause or part of the cause of these ugly crimes.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Next, we have a question from painter and artist Suk Choi from San Francisco.
Yes, my name is Suk Choi. Hi. I question. Thank you for all the hard work you've been done with KAPAC and your strong support. Got pieces issued regarding the Korean Peninsula in Congress. In order to finish the competition between the U.S. and the North and bring about the cooperation between the U.S. and the both Koreas, what are your plans in 170 Congress that KAPAC and other Korean American communities can support?
Well, I hope you can fully support the various legislative initiatives I've outlined, whether it be to expand the definition of humanitarian visits so that it's clear that Korean Americans, if the North Koreans will let them in, can visit North Korea, whether it's for a funeral or a burial or a family reunification. The bigger issues that I've already covered, developing a policy designed to achieve the achievable with regard to the nuclear program and to see an end to the sanctions regime once we achieve that. There is a huge difference to the security of the United States and the world whether North Korea is producing enough fissile material for 10 additional bombs every year, or whether North Korea is simply holding on to a limited, highly monitored stash of weapons and is not producing any more. And so we've got to end the war, allow visits, make a deal on the nuclear program, and end the sanctions. And those are the programs that I hope KAPAC will support. It's what I support. And then we've got to follow what from what the pastor said and what I said in response as far as being effective in pushing that through.
Thank you. Our next question comes from another high school student in New Jersey, Christian Choi. Christian, can you unmute yourself and ask the Congressman your question?
Hello, my name is Christine Choi, and I am a member of the Asian American Youth Council. As we know, many people not only want the formal ending of the war, but they also want the North and South Korea to become united. And although it is clear that the unity between the two Koreas will solve many problems around the world, I would like to know how the unity between the two Koreas will specifically benefit the United States. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian.
Well, I know the Republic of Korea has a minister for unification. And the Korean people are among the last people in the world to be divided by a border involuntarily. And a united Korea would presumably be one without nuclear weapons, and would presumably be a democratic country. So that would be spectacular to achieve. I think long before you get there, you're going to deal with the nuclear issue and the sanctions, and then deal with family visits. It's hard to even imagine unification when right now you can't even have visits. The road I'm advocating gets us closer to where you're talking about going, but I think unification is going to take a while. But obviously, a democratic, peaceful, united Korean Peninsula would be in the interests of every country in the world. Although one can imagine that China or Japan would not fully applaud. I think everybody they might applaud, they might not applaud, but the whole rest of the world would certainly applaud.
Yeah, thank you. And for our last and final question, we have Professor Kwak Tae-hwan from Los Angeles. 교수님.
Okay, thank you, Tammy. Good to see you again. Honorable Congressman Brad Sherman, good to see you again.
Good to see you, Professor.
I am really enjoying your presentation today and also sharing your secrecy. That was a fantastic weapon for us to practice in the future. Mr. Sherman, thank you for your excellent presentation and analysis of various key issues you documented. You indeed are truly Korean friend. My question could be essential question which determine the Korean Peninsula future. Mm-hmm. We hope that the Biden administration will resume nuclear talks with DPRK, North Korea, soon. If US-North Korea nuclear negotiation would eventually fail due to conflicting approaches to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, the Biden administration may make a military plan for preemptive strike against North Korea. I hope not, but I'm assuming that maybe the course in the future. We sincerely hope you would oppose US military action against North Korea. However, if Biden administration will take military action against North Korea, the probability of nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula is very high. Then it appears that the U.S. military action on the peninsula may mean nuclear war between United States and the People's Republic of China, Beijing, because of the China DPRK friendly treaty whereby North Korea will attack China automatically involved in the war. So, Mr. Sherman, sir, what would you do if this happens? And would you support U.S. military action? What will U.S. Congress do? Thank you very much for your candid responses.
Congress needs to make it very clear that we do not authorize, will not pay for, and strongly oppose any unprovoked new Korean war. We want to reach a deal on the nuclear side, and I can't, sanctions are a device to get there. Hopefully that device will develop, will deliver something that is a reasonable settlement, not everything we want. Congress, the Constitution was written in the 1700s by people who could not imagine the world we live in today. And it allocates power over the US military to both Congress and to the executive branch. And it specifies that war can only be declared by Congress, but the military can be deployed by the president. And believe it or not, in a decade after the Constitution was written, this particular issue did come up, though not in a way anywhere as important as what you're talking about. President Jefferson sent the U.S. Navy. If you're familiar with the Song of the Marines, they sing about how they went to the shores of Tripoli. Well, they went to the shores of Tripoli, actually closer to Benghazi, to deal with the Barbary pirates that were attacking American ships and who wanted too high a ransom to stop. But even then, they didn't quite know how the Constitution would apply. There was no declaration of war. There was hostilities. What is clear, however, in the Constitution is that money can be spent only with the approval of Congress. And that is why we need a provision that I will try to add to the appropriations bill to say none of the money we provide can be used to launch an unprovoked attack or an attack on North Korea, except in defense of South Korea and the United States. As to whether I think the president, I think there have been two scary periods of time this century. One was the first part of the George W. Bush administration, in which you had some very serious people around Dick Cheney who could write you long papers about why we should go to war against North Korea. Fortunately, they didn't. But they wouldn't sign a non-aggression pact either. Then under Trump, you had an erratic policy, love letters and insults and back and forth. And one could imagine that while overall averaging the 4 years, the policy toward North Korea would be about the same, on any one day, who knows what could have happened. So you had one administration that was serious but extreme, and another administration that was erratic. The Biden administration is serious and not extreme. And part of the proof of that is that, of course, in the Obama years, there was not a day when you could have imagined, America's launched an unprovoked attack against North Korea. One could have imagined that in 2001 or 2002, given Dick Cheney's role in that administration. And during the Trump administration, you could have imagined anything happening on any day. You could have imagined that were sending 100,000 troops to South Korea, to the Korean Peninsula to attack, you could have imagined that all 28,000 were being withdrawn. You could have imagined them both happening in the same week. You could have imagined anything.
Hey.
This administration is not extreme. It is not erratic. And it is very similar to the Obama administration. So on the one hand, I think Congress needs to prohibit long-term and permanently an unprovoked attack against North Korea. On the other hand, if there was ever a time when you could go to sleep, knowing the executive branch was not going to do this, this is the time when you can sleep well and without Ambien. So I want to thank everybody for this opportunity. I want to thank the professor for his excellent question. And I look forward to working with you again for liaison offices, non-aggression pacts, opposition to unprovoked attacks, family reunification, and eventually a nuclear agreement and the end of sanctions. And then with the woman student who was there, the Korean people would be free to even move toward unification. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, Casey. Thank you, Freeman. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. I will say goodbye at this point. I know you have other important things to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, my friend.
So right now, I'm going to hand it over to our Executive Vice President, Lee Sung-woo, who will recognize some of our distinguished guests. So,
Okay. 예, thank you, Tammy. 안녕하십니까. 이제 한국말로 하겠습니다.
예.
예. 먼저 박경재 총영사님 참석해 주셔서 대단히 감사합니다. 바쁘신 와중에도.
박수로 환영하겠습니다.